Wife cheated with her ex. She thought I'd never find out. My wife secretly reconnected with her ex, and crossed the line, but I discovered everything, and what I did in return wasn't just revenge, it was devastation. Watch how one betrayal turned into a cold, calculated downfall. For 3 years, my fiancée, Lily, who is 27F, and I, who am 29M, had been a strong team. She was intelligent, humorous, and had a way of making you feel like the center of the universe. After she accepted my proposal last year, we immediately started organizing our summer wedding. I believed that everything was perfect and that we were traveling down the smooth road of life. Lily declared one Tuesday that she would be spending some time in her hometown. She had said, "I just need some quality time with my sister," with that smile that usually made me smile. It didn't catch my attention because she had a close relationship with her family and hadn't been there in a long time. She promised to return in a few weeks, packed a duffel bag, and gave me a long kiss that felt completely natural. She had whispered against my cheek, "I already miss you," she called on the first night. A brief check-in, "arrived safely, I love you," etc., is standard. However, the atmosphere changed the following afternoon. Her name flashed on the screen as my phone rang. "Hey," she said in a tinny, distant voice. "I need to discuss something with you." My stomach lurched a bit. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, "what's up?" There was a pause over the line, "So I think I need some time to reflect." The words were heavy and unclear as they hung there. "Think," I said again, my thoughts racing. "Consider what? Is the wedding at issue here? Are you under a lot of stress? Did I make a mistake?" With a level of anxiety I had never experienced before, my questions came out naturally. She dodged, her responses evasive. "No, it's not you. Indeed, I simply feel that I need some alone time to clear my mind." Every instinct told me that something was wrong, but I didn't want to crowd her. "All right," I spoke slowly and deliberately. "I understand if you need space, but just tell me what's happening, Lily, please. Speak to me." "Soon, I will," she had said. "I promise we'll talk soon," but the assurance felt flimsy and hollow. A chilly knot tightened in my stomach as I stared at my phone after the awkward call ended. To the empty room, I whispered, "What the hell just happened?" Following that call, there was little to no communication. My calls went straight to voicemail, her normally active social media accounts went dark, and my texts, just the typical ones, like, "Hey, how's your sister?" or "I'm thinking of you, hope you're okay," went unanswered and vanished into a digital void. No pictures of coffee in the morning, no rambling thoughts, nothing. At least in my part of the world, it seemed as though she had disappeared. Fear began to gnaw at the edges of my composure. In an attempt to gain some understanding, I contacted her sister, Sarah. Sarah's response was succinct and almost vague. "Sorry, I haven't seen her much, she's busy with her own activities." The walls seemed to be closing in, as if there had been a planned shutdown. My pals did their best. Mark said, "Dude, maybe she just got cold feet, needs a breather." Jenna was less tactful, "Ghosting your fiancé for weeks isn't typically the solution to pre-wedding anxiety, Jake." Despite their good intentions, the mounting fear persisted. This wasn't Lily. The Lily I knew and intended to live with would never act in this manner. 1 week prior to her departure, we were actually choosing goddamn napkin rings. I was unable to identify any fights or brewing grudges. I tormented myself by reliving our previous exchanges. Carefully examining each word and glance, trying to find a hint I might have overlooked, nothing. The instant she crossed the county line, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Did she even have her sister with her? The unsightly and unwanted thought slithered into my head, was there another person present? The silence was a breeding ground for suspicion, but I detested going there. Nights turned into extended periods of time spent staring at the ceiling while holding my phone tightly in the hopes of receiving a notification that never came. Social interactions felt forced, and work was a blur. I felt as though my life was on hold while I awaited her refusal to respond. Something inside of me exploded after 2 weeks of this radio silence. Broken only by the reverberation of my own unanswered messages. Space was fine, but disappearing completely was unacceptable. Enough was enough. I would approach her if she refused to speak. I filled up the gas tank, packed some clothes in an overnight bag, and drove the car toward her hometown. Coffee and grim resolve propelled the lengthy drive. I practiced conversations in my mind, alternating between begging for understanding and demanding answers. I still harbored the hope that it was all a huge misunderstanding, a stress-related breakdown that we could resolve. But something colder knew that chaos was on the horizon. It seemed unreal to pull up to her parents' expansive suburban home. I didn't associate it with possible relationship blunders, but rather with awkward small talk and holiday dinners. With my heart thumping like a trapped bird against my ribs, my hand hesitated and then knocked. I knocked again, more loudly. When the door finally opened, Lily was there. Her expression wasn't exactly one of surprise, more like, "Dude, the inevitable has come." A healthy dose of guilt combined with pure, unadulterated shock. She simply stared at me as though I were an apparition while she was framed in the doorway. "Jake," she said, her voice hardly more than a whisper. "What on earth are you doing in this place?" "Lily, what do you suppose I'm doing here?" My voice was tighter than I meant when I asked. "You ignore all calls and texts and go missing for 2 weeks. I became irate after worrying myself to death. "I'm only here now to get answers." She moved aside, allowing me to enter the well-known foyer. It had a subtle scent of old furniture polish and potpourri. She muttered, avoiding my gaze, "I didn't think you'd actually come," and ushered me into the formal living room, a museum of squatty chairs and old family pictures. The silence between us was heavy and oppressive as we sat down. She made an attempt at small talk. "How did the drive go? Want a drink? Did you get stuck in traffic?" It was like applying a band-aid to an open wound, a pitiful attempt at normalcy. I sliced through it. "Stop, Lily. Tell me what the devil is happening, please. Why was there no sound? Why vanish?" She glanced at everything but me as she moved around the room. On the armchair, she picked at a loose thread. She said in a low, almost apologetic, voice, "I've been trying to figure some things out." "Try to figure it out." I leaned forward and pressed. "We had a wedding in the works. What needs to be determined that necessitates ignoring the person you are meant to marry?" She inhaled deeply, as people do before breaking bad news. "When I first arrived here, I ran into Mark, my ex, Mark." The name struck me like a blow to the body. The one whose shadow seemed to linger longer than it should. The college boyfriend she mentioned from time to time. With a taste of copper in my mouth, I repeated, "You ran into him." She hurried to say, "Okay, and it wasn't planned," before turning to face me with wide, beseeching eyes. "You know, I just saw him at the grocery store. And we did end up conversing." I echoed flatly as I spoke. The implication, the reason it was being discussed now after weeks of silence, was more important than the word itself. "Lily, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say that you saw him?" Her eyes fell once more. "I wanted to know how I felt before I upset you. How did you feel?" My voice broke as the hurt began to give way to rage. "Lily, we're engaged. Months remain until our wedding. How did you feel, exactly?" Then something awful occurred, and it was said in a voice so low I nearly missed it. "I've been hanging out with him," she said. The air was heavy with the words, just catching up and conversing. I simply needed to check for any unresolved emotions. The floor appeared to slant. For an instant, my vision became blurry. Unsolved emotions. My voice trembled with a mix of anger and disbelief as I choked out. "You're engaging in emotional archaeology with your ex-boyfriend when we should be constructing a future together. While utterly disregarding me." "Jake," I had to be certain. Her tone became a little defensive. "You understand that I didn't want to go down the aisle with any doubts. Questions." I fired back. Losing control. "So you decided to ignore me as a solution? To abandon me for weeks, as I wondered if you were all right? Are you wondering what went wrong? Just because you happened to run into Mark at the Piggly Wiggly?" At my sides, my hands balled into fists. Lily, what does this mean? Is it still a mystery to you? To be absolutely clear, I will not wait for you to decide whether or not I am your goddamn backup plan. A heavy tread sounded on the hallway's hardwood floor just as her face began to crumple. Richard, Lily's father, occupied the doorway, ex-cop stock gone slightly to seed. He was a big man with a persistent sense of entitlement and disapproval. His hard, icy eyes were fixed on me. As if he had heard the raised voices. What on earth is happening in here? His voice was full of aggression as he boomed, his expression darkened as he turned from Lily's upset face to mine. You, he snarled, stepping in my direction while utterly disregarding Lily. What did you do? Please, Dad, he waved Lily away as she began. Richard snapped, staring at me. I asked him. It sounded like you were shouting at my daughter when I heard it. He stepped forward again, encroaching on my personal space. He had a subtle scent of entitlement and stale cigar smoke. I said, trying to maintain my composure in spite of the adrenaline that was now pumping through me. We were having a private conversation. Richard. A private discussion? Bullshit, he spat, his face flushed. You drove her back here, didn't you? Look at her, you upset her. My girl came running home because of what you did. Lily tried again, sounding weaker. Dad, that's not. Without glancing at Lily, he ordered her to stay out of this. His posture was menacing as he returned all of his attention to me. Do you really believe you can just walk in here and treat my daughter and my house with such disrespect? Even though my heart was pounding, I retorted, I came here for answers she refused to give me, answers to the question of why she vanished while purportedly working out her feelings for her ex. Richard's eyes became slitted. Don't say such things about my daughter. You are to blame for whatever occurred. You and other men always believe you own women. He stabbed me in the chest with a thick finger. Boy, you had better watch what you say, I said softly. Get your hand off me, Richard. Did he make a harsh, ugly sound when he laughed? Are you going to take action? His breath was hot and sour against my face as he leaned closer. You made a mistake and forced her to leave, so why are you now bothering her here? He growled menacingly and lowered his voice. Perhaps you need to be taught a lesson about how to respect women. Amazingly, disgustingly, he spat after that. A drop of saliva fell onto my cheek. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. My body tensed for a fight I sorely didn't want in this immaculate, stuffy living room, so I instinctively raised my hand to wipe the disgusting spit off my face rather than strike. Lily finally screamed, Dad, stop it. She grabbed his arm and pulled him back just as I clenched my jaw and forced myself not to physically retaliate. With panicked eyes, she begged Jake to just leave. Not for me, but for the worsening circumstances. Despite shaking her off, Richard remained motionless, staring at me and panting. Yes, he growled, leave my house immediately and don't return. This is not a place for you. I glanced at Lily's tear-streaked face. Her helplessness against him, and her involvement in this whole situation. Not only did her father exhibit entitled arrogance, but she did as well, albeit with tears covering it up. What did she think I would understand? After she betrayed me, would you forgive her and fight her father for her honor? I felt disgust, which was colder and more decisive than anger. I said in a chillingly calm voice, don't worry, I will not be returning. I used the back of my hand to wipe my cheek. Without turning around, I left the living room and proceeded through the foyer and out the front door. It sounded like the end of a really, really bad chapter when the lock behind me clicked. Anger, hurt, and a deep sense of clarity filled the drive home. The ex-boyfriend issue was no longer the only one. That repulsive scene with her father was the result of deceit, cowardice, and disrespect. For me, there was no way out of this situation. The weeks that followed were odd. A kind of numb autopilot took over: work, exercise, rest, and so on. I told Jenna and Mark everything, including the altercation with Richard. Mark was prepared to take his own car down there. Good riddance, Jake, you dodged a freaking missile, Jenna said repeatedly. Their indignation strengthened my resolve. I wasn't insane, the way she and her family behaved was completely unacceptable. I began to mentally dismantle the wedding, which was a painful task. Although it felt premature to contact vendors, the mental checklist was in motion: photographer, caterer, venue deposit, a future vanishing before my eyes. Lily had now completely stopped talking. Nothing, no calls, no texts. She had apparently made up her mind, or maybe her father had done it for her. I felt a sense of relief. For the life I believed we were creating, the other part experienced a phantom limb ache. Then, unexpectedly, a text message appeared. Not Lily. One of Lily's closest friends, Mia, was there. I had always liked this person, but I didn't know them well on my own. The text said, "Hey Jake. I heard that you and Lily are no longer together. I wanted to see how you were doing and to check in. I'm so sorry that things didn't work out." I gazed at the text. Was this a real check-in for Lily's reconnaissance? A flicker of loneliness fought caution. I replied with a straightforward, "Hey, Mia, thanks for getting in touch. Yes, it's difficult, doing all right, I suppose." To my surprise, Mia was a pleasant person to speak with. Over the following few days, we exchanged texts. She fostered a sense of camaraderie by sharing a story about her own difficult breakup. It was pleasant. Simply having a conversation with someone who understood the situation but wasn't directly involved. She offered empathetic platitudes and listened without passing judgment. After a few days, she recommended coffee. She texted, "Get you out of the house, my reward." I paused. She was gently persistent, but the thought of socializing felt exhausting. "Just an hour, please. The fresh air will benefit you." I reluctantly consented. The coffee date went well, normal, even. We discussed movies, our jobs, and the traffic. She inquired about my interests and time in college. I hadn't felt like anyone was interested in me, aside from the drama that surrounded me, for weeks. She did, however, lean in a little toward the end, her face serious. "You deserve someone who genuinely values you, Jake," she said quietly. "Someone who is devoted to you and would never consider taking you for granted." The remark came off as clumsy. I muttered something vague like, "Yeah, I guess," feeling uneasy all of a sudden. I didn't want to cause trouble with one of Lily's friends, and I wasn't searching for a rebound. Mia, however, didn't appear to understand. Her flirtatious memes and invitations to get together again increased in frequency. It was an obvious escalation, but it wasn't aggressive. She pushed for dinner one evening. "Jake, just dinner, friends hanging out, no pressure." I made an effort to appear modest by claiming to be exhausted and to have work to do. However, she playfully made me feel guilty. "Don't force me to eat by myself." I gave in against my better judgment. It was a mistake to have dinner. She was well-groomed, her makeup flawless, and her perfume evident. I wore a faded band t-shirt and jeans. Even though I tried to keep the conversation light-hearted, there was a tension that begged to go on a date. She casually touched my arm too many times and laughed a little too loudly at my jokes. She seemed to be trying out for a part one hadn't posted. That night, as I drove home, I decided to keep my distance from him. No more hanging out alone. Although I was grateful for the initial support, I didn't want to go into this area. It felt strange, almost predatory, considering the situation. After I had left her parents' home, I had been in almost complete silence for about 6 weeks when my doorbell rang. It was a series of rapid, insistent presses, as if someone were leaning on it, rather than a courteous knock. I felt sick to my stomach. I had a terrible suspicion that I knew who it was. Lily was standing there when I opened the door. She appeared annoyingly normal, perhaps a little worn out around the eyes, but she managed a tentative smile like she was delivering misdirected mail. She was neither tearful nor apologetic. Instead of disappearing for weeks and ruining our lives, she said, "Hey," as though she had just popped out of milk. I just stared, stunned for a moment. "Hey," I did it without leaving the doorway. She made a vague internal gesture while shifting her weight. "Can we have a conversation?" I moved aside, defying every yelling instinct that told me to slam the door. Perhaps she had finally come to give a sincere apology and a rational explanation. Hope, that foolish, unyielding weed, flickered dimly. She entered my living room, which we used to share, took a look around, and said, "Wow, you've kept it really clean." She then patted the cushion next to her and sat on the couch, so she started inhaling. "We must discuss the wedding arrangements." I blinked, then let out a not-so-happy laugh. It was incisive, disbelieving, almost hysterical. I said it again, "Wedding plans," and it tasted like ash. "What on earth are you talking about, Lily?" Her smile wavered, her features were clouded by confusion. As though I were the one acting irrationally. "Well, yeah," she said, her voice becoming defensive. "The location called, they need the date to be confirmed, and I was thinking, remember, that we ought to use the lavender chair sashes." We discussed stopping, so I interrupted her while raising a hand. "Just stop," my voice was getting dangerously quiet. "What made you believe there was still a wedding to arrange after your father spat on me during our most recent conversation, in which you confessed to having feelings for your ex?" Her face went a little white. That was a miscommunication. I realized that Dad was simply upset and that the situation with Mark was over. "It's always been you. Jake, it's you." I was confused and made a mistake, but now I know what I want. She made an attempt to grasp my hand. As though her touch were burning, I retreated. "An error?" I echoed, pacing now as it felt like the four walls were closing in. "You consider it a mistake to let your crazy dad attack me after you've been emotionally or physically estranged from your fiancé for weeks. Lily, that's not an error. God damn, those decisions define your character." She raised her voice to insist that it wasn't like that. "I wanted to avoid hurting you, so I needed space." I laughed and turned to face her, saying, "You didn't want to hurt me." I was left in the dark for weeks, allowing my imagination to run wild, and I had to drive halfway across the state to confront you. That was more painful than any sincere discussion could have ever been. And now, weeks later, you come here expecting, what? That I'll simply throw open my arms to greet you when you return? Act as if nothing occurred. Are you crazy? She finally broke down in tears as she said, "I came back because I love you." "Predictable," I said bluntly, "too little, too late, Lily, love doesn't look like this. This is not how trust looks. This is definitely not how respect looks." The diamond engagement ring was still sitting there, mocking me, when I looked down at her left hand. My ring, the representation of a vow she had broken. A new wave of rage swept through. "Take it off," she said, looking up in surprise and temporarily forgetting her tears. "What?" I pointed to the ring. I spoke in a harsh, emotionless voice, "Remove it. When you let your father spit in my face and chose him over me, you gave up the right to wear that." Her eyes narrowed after widening in shock, her hand hovered protectively over the ring as she hesitated. "Don't do this, Jake." I stepped closer and said, "Take it off now. Lily, or I'll take it off for you." She slid the ring off her fingers slowly and reluctantly, her fingers shaking. It seemed like a small, symbolic triumph in a terrible, far-reaching conflict. Her palm was flat as she extended it toward me. I refused to accept it. "I told you to put it on the table." Between us, she set it on the coffee table. In the lamplight, it glinted, appearing suddenly inconsequential and cheap. She waited, perhaps hoping that I would change my mind or soften. But I had a granite face. I made up my mind. "This is it," she said in a whisper, her voice heavy with tears that had not yet been shed. "You're finished." The word firm, final, I said, "I'm finished, finished." "Lily, you can't treat me like a choice. You can't put me on hold while you take a taste of the past and then return with a welcome wagon. Relationships don't operate like that. Love isn't that. It's selfishness, pure and simple." She flinched. The tears came easily this time. "However, my parents and the wedding will put an end to me. We've informed everyone. Deposits are made. Flights have been booked." As she began to hyperventilate, she collapsed to the ground and gripped her head. "This is not possible. Everyone waiting, you must bring me back. Jake, please." My living room rug was the scene of a full-blown meltdown as she rocked back and forth. For a moment, I watched her with a peculiar mixture of disgust and sympathy. This had nothing to do with us or love. This was about avoiding repercussions and saving face. "Get up, Lily," I said icily. "Nothing is changing as a result of this sympathy party. You must go." "No," she sobbed, clutching the coffee table's leg. "I'm not going anywhere. This needs to be fixed. I'd had enough." I knelt down, took her by the upper arms, and pulled her upright. She fought feebly and sobbed more. "Jake, let me go." "You're going out," I said, guiding her to the front door. In an attempt to resist, she dug her heels in, but I was stronger and had outlived her concern for gentleness. I pushed her onto the porch, firmly but not violently, and opened the door. "Get out, Lily," I said again, my voice trembling a little from adrenaline and fatigue. Her face twisted in desperation and anger as she stumbled, caught her balance, and spun around. She screamed, "You bastard." She lunged back toward the open door before I could respond. Just inches from her face, I slammed it shut, causing the wood to vibrate. She immediately began beating both fists on it. "Come on in. Open this door, Jake." Her voice was raw as she screamed, "We need to talk." She violently rattled the doorknob. I shouted back through the door, "Go home, Lily, it's over, and I'll call the police if you don't leave now." For a moment, the pounding ceased. I heard her voice, which was quieter but still audible, followed by muffled sobbing, "You wouldn't." Her voice rose again, sharp and angry, as I heard her fumbling with her phone, probably speaking to someone. "He took the ring back and threw me out." "Dad, no, you must come right away, I'm still here." "Hell no, not him again," I thought, feeling a new wave of dread. Headlights flashed across my front window a few minutes later, and then there was the sound of heavy footsteps pounding up the walkway and a car door slamming. After that, there was more violent and heavier pounding on my door. "Now open this door, you witch's son, Jake." Richard's voice, full of rage, was heard. "I'll kill you if you touch my daughter. Break it down, Dad." From the porch, I heard Lily urging him on. A strong impact, probably a kick or a shoulder charge, caused the door to tremble. My anger was pierced by a cold, sharp fear. This felt dangerous and was no longer just drama. Richard was insane. I moved away from the door and fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "What's your emergency, 911? The operator responded in a cool tone. I heard another loud thud against the wood and stammered, keeping my voice low but urgent, "My ex-fiancé's father is trying to break down my door. I'm being threatened by him." I provided my address while anxiously staring at the door, fearing it would splinter open at any second. Officers were en route. The operator assured me. Lily's urging screams and Richard's thunderous threats broke up the pounding. Although it seemed like forever, the siren's shriek would likely become louder in just 5 or 6 minutes. Nearer, blue and red lights blazed through my windows, frantically painting the walls. Outside, I heard police officers giving me stern orders. "Move away from the door, sir, make sure your hands are visible to me." Richard's reaction was aggressive, full of profanity. There was more shouting, sounds of struggle, and a scuffle. "Give up resisting." Then there was a sharp cry, perhaps Lily's, and the clear sound of handcuffs clicking shut as someone was pushed to the ground. I cautiously peered through the peephole and saw 2 officers cuffing Richard's hands behind his back while he was pinned face down on my lawn. He continued to shout profanities. Lily was standing close by, yelling at the police, appearing confused and in a panic. To get her statement, another officer was attempting to calm her down. It was ruthless, disorderly, and incredibly ugly. They dragged Richard into the back of a patrol car while he was still struggling and yelling threats at my house. An officer knocked on my door, took my statement, and pointed out the doorframe damage. Richard was taken into custody for trespassing, resisting arrest, and attempting to break and enter. Quiet but tense was the aftermath. The police departed. Lily was either picked up or went with her father. With the exception of my own heart thumping. The house fell silent. Still feeling the rush of adrenaline, I checked the locks again. Now it was officially over. However, the conclusion was much more repulsive than I had ever thought. I lived in a fog in the days that followed. Attorneys became involved in Richard's charges. I made a formal statement outlining the events leading up to the attempted break-in as well as the initial altercation at their home. Rehashing the entire sordid mess was exhausting. Mia texted once more about the arrest incident, expressing shock and sympathy. "I heard what happened, Jake. That's crazy, are you all right?" Her worry felt different this time. Perhaps a bit too eager. I gave her a brief thank you while avoiding eye contact. She proposed to get together again a week later. "Make sure you're truly okay just to talk." I had to establish a clear limit. We got together for lunch, which I chose, in the middle of the day, in neutral territory. I let her express her sympathy before getting right to the point. "Look, Mia," I said, maintaining a firm yet gentle tone. "Thank you so much for getting in touch with me first. When things first fell apart, it meant a lot, but I need to be very clear now. To be honest, I just need time to process everything that has happened, and I'm not in the mood to start anything new. I believe it would be best if we simply kept our distance. I hope you get it." There was a slight tightening of her smile. Perhaps a bit too hastily, she waved a hand dismissively and said, "Yeah, no, of course, you understand completely, friends." I didn't mean for it to seem strange or anything. I was relieved but cautious as I said, "Thanks, Mia, I appreciate that." After that, we quickly finished our lunch. I noticed a movement down the street as I was making my way back to my car. Halfway down the block was a silver sedan that looked familiar. Lily was leaning against a lamppost, feigning to be engrossed in her phone. It was obvious from the angle and the way she held herself. She wasn't merely strolling by, she was observing me while I was having lunch with her friend. My blood froze. I considered approaching her and confronting her. But what would be the point? More denials, more drama. After locking the doors and getting into my car, I drove off while keeping a watchful eye on my rearview mirror. It wasn't an isolated incident, but the silver car didn't follow. The sightings increased in frequency and unnervingness over the course of the following week. When I arrived home from work, her car was parked down the street. She caught a glimpse of her in a busy coffee shop, darting down an aisle in the grocery store, and then turning and walking away. She wasn't calling, texting, or coming over to me. It was merely presence, an eerie, silent surveillance. She seemed to be waiting for me, pushing my limits, or perhaps simply reminding me that she was still alive and had some claim on my life. While ordering takeout one evening, I noticed her car parked thoughtfully across the street from the eatery. That was the tipping point. I didn't go up against her. After getting my food, I went home, took out my phone, and locked the door. I ran my fingers over the screen. "I am aware that you have been following me, Lily. Stop it, I see you. This almost qualifies as stalking. Neither of us is healthy as a result. Nothing is altered. Go away from me." With my heart racing, I hit send. There was no response. I didn't anticipate one. However, her car wasn't parked on the street the following day, and I didn't see her at the coffee shop, the store, or any place else. The unsettling surveillance appeared to stop. Perhaps the text's directness and the labeling of her actions had finally made an impression. Or perhaps she had simply switched to a new strategy. Months dragged into weeks. Richard's legal battle continued, ultimately leading to a plea agreement that included probation and required anger management. Considering that, it's really a slap on the wrist. After our lunch conversation, Mia avoided me, which I appreciated. A new, more subdued rhythm began to take hold in life. Slowly but surely, I was getting better and beginning to feel like myself again. Then one night, in the dead of the morning, I was startled out of sleep by a loud whoosh outside. The sharp stench of burning chemicals came next. There was a strange orange glow coming from the window of my bedroom. With a pounding heart, I clambered out of bed and peered outside. My car, parked in the driveway, was engulfed in flames. The night sky was filled with thick black smoke. It was instinctive. After putting on my shoes and grabbing my phone, I ran outside and dialed 911 once more. I saw him as I turned the corner of the house, staying well away from the fire that had once been my car. There was a dark-clad figure running down the street from my house with a hood pulled down. "Hey!" I roared, my fear obliterated by adrenaline and rage. I shouted into my phone as I left after him, still holding it tightly. My car was set on fire. On foot, the suspect is running south on Maple. I exerted myself, running quickly as the fire's heat radiated behind me, a vanishing shadow, the figure ahead. He was quick, ducked down an alleyway between houses, and knew the area. Gasping for air, I followed. However, he had disappeared into the night by the time I got to the opposite end of the alley. I was standing there with my chest heaving, my eyes stinging from perspiration, and I could hear the sirens getting louder. I knew it wasn't Lily even though I couldn't see his face or prove it. It was her ex-cop father. There were hints of past connections, possibly not totally pure ones, in the prompt. This felt like cold, calculated, and horribly professional retaliation. He came after my property because he was no longer able to reach me directly. A charred skeletal wreck was left behind after the fire department arrived and put out the fire. I reported it to the police. I told them about Richard's arrest, the confrontation, the history, the stalking, and my suspicions about the person I saw fleeing. I brought up his history and the possible reason. They promised an investigation, listened, and made notes. However, investigations require proof. It was a generic figure. He was not seen up close by any witnesses. Richard, who was likely sleeping soundly at home, miles away, had an alibi, of course. After several exasperating months, the case finally went cold and was formally closed due to a lack of evidence, with no hard evidence connecting him to the arson. The car was paid for by the insurance company. It was made entirely of replaceable plastic and metal. However, what remained was the violation, the escalation, and the terrifying knowledge of Richard's potential. That concludes the update. Insurance money that I haven't yet spent has taken the place of my car. Lily, a poisonous memory, is no longer in my life. Her father may be capable of more, but hopefully the police attention, even if it is brief, will deter him. It's been quite the journey, and Mia is unimportant. Arson, stalking, confrontation, and betrayal. Although it reads like a cheesy thriller, for the past few months, it has been my life. Am I alright? Scarred, mostly, without a doubt. However, I got out and am now standing. And one thought stands out above all others as I consider rebuilding and beginning anew. I will never again accept anything less because I deserve so much better than any of that. Thank you all for reading. Putting everything in writing was helpful.